Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. And I want to share with you some tips of people getting jobs. So I'll cover a lot, and then I'm going to allow some time at the end for Q&A. And you can also write your questions as we go, and I'll try to answer those questions as we go along. So there's a chat box if you want to type anything. So I have had probably 5 graduates find jobs in the last 6 weeks. So I'll share some of those stories, and I would love for you guys to be successful as well in finding a job. So let's get cracking. All right, so the first topic that we're going to cover today is all about your personal brand. So your personal brand, it sounds kind of cheesy, but it's all about having an identity of how you're going to describe yourself and making sure that that identity is part of your interview responses, it's part of your resume objective, it's part of your LinkedIn description. So just giving you an example, the strengths, the Gallup strengths tool that I use with a lot of my clients, it gives people either the top 5 strengths in an online profile or the top 10. And that gives them a language to describe themselves. And I had a lady last week who got a job. She said they were so impressed when she brought her strengths report to the interview, and she talked about getting help from a career coach. They loved it. So strengths can be you are a strategic thinker, you are futuristic, you are analytical, you are, you are a wonderful people person. You are, what other strengths are there? There's over 30 strengths. You love meeting new people. You love being a deep thinker, intellection. So knowing your strengths is actually quite powerful, and it shows that you're more self-aware than your competitors if you can pay the fee to take the strengths survey. And then you also need to show that you've learned things. So I had a mock interview with a young man yesterday, and I asked him, what have you learned about yourself in the variety of jobs that you've had? And he talked about how he realized that all the jobs that he's loved are the ones where he's talking to people. He loved tutoring primary school kids. He loved doing gaming facilitation. So those things are part of his identity. And then the comfort zone, I mentioned that because I noticed that in some of the younger generation, I really need them to focus more on networking than online applications. And we'll talk more about networking, but it's getting out of your comfort zone. So even if the job isn't exactly matching your criteria, but it could lead to those opportunities, do it. And even if you are unsure if it's going to lead to paid work, do it, because then you've still got experience that you can add to your resume. So it's really having conversations with strangers, getting out of that comfort zone, doing more exploratory research on where you want to work and who you might connect with. And then for the social media, I always need to mention this because some people don't realize that the HR recruiters, they actually look at your Facebook profile, they look at your digital media presence to see if there's anything controversial, like you partying or any racist comments or things that could not be received well in a workplace. So just be conscious that your social media channels are part of your brand, that authentic brand that you're creating as well. Okay, no questions yet. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about, and I'll show you some resume samples, is how to get a resume noticed. And because you may not have work experience in this industry, you've got to work a bit harder on describing the skills that they're looking for, the transferable skills, but then giving examples from your uni projects, from any volunteer experience that you've done. And so I'll talk about Annalise. So she was a member of the Woolworths team for 7 years. She graduated Western Sydney with a marketing degree. And so she had been applying to all kinds of online jobs, just never got a response. It was quite disheartening. She got one callback that was a bit shady, and we talked about that. But what we did was we sat down and looked at her resume, and she didn't mention all of these achievements that she had. So she had been promoted to a store supervisor. She had successfully completed an audit for that store as a stand-in for the store manager. She had won awards with the town center that she worked at. So all of those things are great things to showcase on the very first page of your resume. And you can also use them in, bullet points that describe your capabilities, like customer service skills or problem solving. So all of those examples should be front and center in your resume, even if they don't relate to the marketing job that you're applying for. And just to close out that story, so she kept applying. Her dream job was to work in marketing at Woolworths. And she kept applying. And she finally, after we reworked her resume, she got a call back from the marketing HR team. And they said, "We really liked your resume, but you didn't get the job. Don't give up." And sure enough, she starts next week as a catalog manager for Woolworths. So she got called back in for an interview. She did great. So it's really important on how you position your resume to showcase your achievements. Now, let me show you some examples. Okay, so hopefully you can see this okay. So this is a resume sample from another uni student or uni graduate. So she's actually kind of showcased that she's a very bubbly, vibrant person. She likes problem solving, analyzing data. So nothing fundamentally wrong on this resume when you look at it at face value, but it's simple things that would get her resume thrown out, like having an empty bullet point. Or down here, she's got round bullet points with then hyphens, like it looks like she hasn't quite finished it, and that would get her thrown out. And from talking with her, she's actually combined the customer service supervisor and the checkout operator. And so we ended up splitting those out to show that she was a checkout operator for the first couple of years, and then she got promoted to supervisor, floor supervisor. And that came with different responsibilities, leading people and doing store campaigns and solving customer service problems. So it's a different skill set, and it's even an even better message when you can show that you worked your way up in one particular employer. You never want to water that down. Even if it's a different industry, it's really a good message. And then the second page, we actually put some of her volunteer work that she had done. Look, they were only one-day events, but to show that she did it consistently, it says something of her character to the employer. And she got a job. She now works for a local city council as the customer service officer, so she's doing great. But that's just one example. The other thing is you've got to explain job gaps in your resume. So if you haven't worked, we need to say that you've been volunteering, that you're helping out, your parents' store, you're tutoring, you're freelancing, something that shows while you've been job searching that you've been keeping yourself busy. We've got to explain that job gap. And you can put studied uni, if that is part of the gap in your employment. You can put that you studied uni full-time for 2 years, 3 years, whatever, that is acceptable. Okay, and then this is the polished version of Emily's resume. So this is what helped her get the callback for the job. So we've got an overview of the type of role that she's seeking. We've got the skills, the transferable skills that she has, the education. The education doesn't have to go on the front page, but it can if you don't have as much experience in the industry that you're targeting. And then we start with her work history and we list some of the achievements that she's had. So just by rewording these, it got her a callback for interviews. And then the second page, we didn't change much. We still had the Alzheimer's Australia volunteer work. So yeah, if you can do volunteer work, that speaks volumes of you as well. Okay, so now let's go to cover letters. So there's a rule of thumb on cover letters that only half of them get read. And the more that I poll people and ask people in the industry, the more it just reinforces that half say they never look at them, half of them do. So don't take your chances. Write a good cover letter. And this is probably one that's not a great example. So there's a formula that I use and my clients are getting callbacks. This one kind of talks about, he's recently graduated from high school and university. He talks about his soft skills, his personality traits, honesty and integrity. He talks about being a school captain in high school. And he's got some good achievements, but now we want to elevate you. So it's not a bad thing if you're fresh out of high school and you're talking about being captain, but now that you're out of university, we need to talk about some of the cool projects that you've worked on, the cool customer service jobs that you might have had to show that you know how to work with people, and any volunteer or work experience that you might have done that contributes to the role that you're targeting. So let me show you a different cover letter because it's more customized to the job advertisement. It shows that Chris is listening to what they want, and it shows his communication skills. So let me click on this. So right at the top, he's got his name. So that notice that name matches the branding of his resume. He doesn't know who the hiring manager is, but he's listed Dear Hiring Manager. And the other one, it said to who it may concern. So let's lift that greeting up by saying Dear HR Recruiter or Dear HR Manager or Hiring Manager. We're making it very clear the role that he's applying for in bold, and then having an intro paragraph that talks about a bit of his experience and his passion. It's got to be short and sweet. I'm excited about this job. You could say it's my dream job. And that gets people's attention. Then what we did was we pasted from the job ad. So this is more time consuming for cover letters than it is for resumes. But for cover letters, we want to list, we don't have to list all of the bullet points in the job advertisement, but we want to pick the ones that we know we are really strongly matching, and then list examples or evidence of how we meet that criteria. So he's going for a marketing job. He's listed that he's worked with a small business. He's had exposure to Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, MailChimp, LinkedIn. Pretty good. And he could also say that he increased the subscriber or the engagement of those platforms 50 to 100%. That's a great achievement. And then he can talk about how he raised funds for a university project. He's starting to learn some of the softwares that are needed in the marketing space. And of course, they're asking in the job ad that he has a degree. So he's saying, yep, I completed my degree with marketing and sports management. And then the very bottom paragraph of that cover letter, I like to grab something from their ad that talks about the culture and say, this excites me, or this really much aligns with my personal traits and talents. So it's a very short one-page letter. It doesn't ramble. If you imagine an HR recruiter that's new to the job and they're really not sure when they're reviewing 200 resumes, you've now made it really easy for them to say, oh yeah, this person meets the criteria. I'll put them in the interview pile. So don't underestimate that somebody that's looking at your resume doesn't have all of the technical knowledge. Don't forget that they may not have as much technical knowledge as you do. So if you make it easy for them and tell them these are the criteria that I meet, it moves you along in the process. Okay, and then LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, you definitely need a great photo, not too serious. I see a lot of photos, and let me put some examples up here. The uni graduate photo is okay, but I would only leave that up for like 3 to 6 months, and then you need to change it to a professional photo, because what we don't want is we don't want to alert their attention to how long you've been looking, because then they think, oh, is something wrong with that person? So it's better in your photo and your headline not to call attention to the length of time that you've been looking for work. And again, on LinkedIn, your work history should match your resume. So call out, I had a client last week who has been a stay-at-home dad for 2.5 years. He's actually got that in his resume and his LinkedIn work history. So these photos, I think, are kind of self-explanatory why they're not the best. He looks like kind of a party man. This one, just because it's cropped, it's a bit grainy. We want a nice clear photo with a background that's not distracting and shows you, and it doesn't have to be a suit and tie, but something in a professional manner. And you don't have to spend a lot of money to get good photos. Take the photos at dusk so that you have that warm light on you, and have a great smile. Even if you don't love your teeth, a smile makes you look more approachable and someone that others will want to work with. The other thing in the headline is that you can be a bit creative with it. And if you notice, lots of people put their job titles. Don't put your job title. Put some attributes about yourself that are more attention grabbing. And that way, as your job titles change over the years, that headline should still stay true to you. And then the about summary, that is definitely read behind the scenes by LinkedIn recruiters and employers. So make sure it's in first person and it talks about what you're passionate about. Don't repeat your work history. Don't repeat your education. Just talk about what excites you. What are your aspirations? And, what have you learned over the years about yourself? And then absolutely, it's good to add volunteer activities or even following groups that are philanthropic or altruistic. So if it's part of your brand, if you're paying attention to organizations that are doing great things for the earth or for humans or what have you, that helps elevate your LinkedIn profile as well. And LinkedIn is a very powerful tool that you can use to score coffee dates or just informational meetings, which I'll talk about in a sec. So don't minimize it. Even while you're still attending uni, you should be reaching out to your friends who may be job contacts in 5-10 years from now, or even lecturers, anyone that you meet. Just send them a nice, hey, it was nice to meet you today. Send them a LinkedIn invite. That's a great idea to build your network. Okay. I'm just looking at some questions here. So let me pause for a second. Okay. Thanks for coming. Is the stream lagging? Is it still lagging? No. Okay. All right, cool. Phew, that panic. Okay, so now let's talk about networking. So the mistake that uni grads make is they sit behind the computer and apply for a ton of jobs. And what I would say to you is do 25% of online applications and 75% networking. Getting out of your comfort zone that I mentioned earlier. Really trying to ask people for advice. Don't ask for a job. Tell them, be clear on what you're looking for, what your interests are. It's not for any job, because they will be more likely to help you if you can describe what you're looking for and you're confident in that aspiration. Your attitude really makes a difference. So I introduced a client who has marketing and sports management degree, mad cricket fan, and I introduced him to, I wasn't sure actually how influential this man was in the Australian Cricket Association, but I said, I reached out to this man and said, hey, would you mind just having an informational meeting with a uni grad? And he said, absolutely. they had a meeting, and I coached the uni grad on being very clear on your responses and ready to respond to what are you looking for, what do you want to be doing in 5-10 years. And that meeting went so well that he said, let me get back to you. And he came back a week later and said, would you be interested in a 4 to 5 week internship at the Sydney Cricket Ground? He took it. He loved it. Now they are offering him a full-time job as a club officer. So dream job landed. There's other people that have offered to volunteer at a business that turns into paid work. Don't worry if it's part-time work at first, it'll come. But if you can get in and do any type of shadowing of a job or volunteering, those are always beneficial, and we can get you exposure that way. So treat it like a job interview. Ask if you can work for free if you can. This is only if it's within your means. And if you can volunteer to help out for a few weeks, but time box it, because what I don't want them to do is take advantage of you if you are working for free for weeks and months on end. That's not okay. So it's really just to give them a flavor of what your work ethic is, and to what happened with my another uni grad. So he got a film degree, and he did an internship to complete the film degree. He then completed school, started working for this internship business, and got paid work, which is great. And he applied for a different role, and the internship business actually called the company that he applied to endorse him and helped him get an interview. So these, even though the internship may not be great money or may not be the dream job, having that person now as a great reference for someone and being able to put that on your resume as experience is so valuable. So don't rule out if it's full-time, if it's not full-time activities that you can pick up some of that side work. And just checking for more questions. Okay. So now I would like to open it up. Oh, I do want to talk about one other thing. Interviews. So I have a lot of interview resources that is free on my webpage, on the career advice page. And I have videos talking about top mistakes people make on video interviews, top mistakes people make on face-to-face interviews, what to do, what not to do after the interview, what not to do during the interview. So I think I have like 5 videos. But what I do want to say is practice. So practice with a friend. If you need, I'm happy to share my interview template that just goes through kind of the basic questions. It doesn't take more than 20-30 minutes. And the more practice you have, the more, and with a friend or even with me, we can give you feedback on the responses that can be stronger or put you in a stronger light, and the responses that can cause potentially a concern of the employer if you describe something that might make them worry that you can't cope with a fast-paced environment or constantly changing or perhaps loosely defined environment, because that is the nature of work these days. Then we want to make sure we put you in the best light. So do the practice interviews if you can. Even you can record yourself answering questions. There's lots of resources online, but I have an interview guide that you can also download on my interview page. And I think it's harder to coach for interviews because it's very one-on-one to your stories, your body language, the way you answer the questions and tell your stories. And also the really great thing that I'm sharing with people, and it's actually giving them brownie points in their interviews, is asking great questions at the end, not just the typical what are the next steps, when will I hear from you, but asking very thoughtful questions that will further impress the interviewer, like, what do you think the top 3 challenges of this role are, or how do you like working for this company? Give me an example of a recent example of the culture that you described. So those are things that are a bit more intellectual and will help give you points in the interview. Okay, so now I would love to open it up for questions. So if anyone wants to write in questions. Okay, so here's one. Should a uni grad go for any job he can get or wait longer for the job you enjoy? I just did a video on this. I don't know if it's posted yet, but it is better if you can pay your bills, if you can stick it out and just do more networking in the industry that you want to get in. So I have a client that I'm working with, and he works at BP Oil, and he's got a really great IT, and particularly in QA testing, quality assurance testing. He's got all these promotions that he's had at the employers that he worked at. And because he's worked for a friend at BP Oil for the last 2 years, he's having trouble getting interviews. And so it's much harder to recover from that, even though I understand he has a family, he's having to support wife and child. But it is, if you're a uni grad and you have a bit more freedom to wait for that right role, I would rather you take a part-time role or even an ad hoc role in your industry that doesn't pay, a set amount of hours every week, so that you can have that experience versus something that's completely unrelated. That doesn't mean you can't recover from that. So I had a uni graduate that just got a job. Her mom had cancer, and she graduated from uni, and then 18 months later, she went back to try to get a graduate nursing role, and no one would give her an interview. So what we did was we improved her resume and her application letter, but we owned her story that she had to take a gap year because she had to care for her mom. And she starts her new job at a private hospital in 3 weeks. So by her owning that story, and she also talked about it in her interview, they had no challenge with that. And they asked her, what are your weaknesses? And she said, well, I guess it would be lack of confidence because I haven't been in the healthcare industry for the last year and a half. And they were okay with that. They offered her the job like 3 days later. So it's being authentic. It's owning your story. If you had, travel, if you had to care for a family member, if you were sick, we don't give a lot of detail, and don't worry, they won't ask, but just say, something that relates to that event in your resume to explain why you haven't been working, or to explain why she was working at a restaurant, at an Italian restaurant, and she was just offered the role of manager at that restaurant. So she happily was able to turn it down and tell them she's still happy to work there part-time, but she's going to take the full-time nursing job. So good question. Okay, so more questions. Do you think experienced employers are willing to network uni grads due to the lack of experience or value? It's a good question. I think it depends on the person, and you can kind of tell by the way they write their LinkedIn profile if there's someone that has strengths that are, developing others or cultivating others. So I had a client who wanted to get into the environmental space, and in her LinkedIn profile, I reached out to a total stranger to ask her if she would have an informational meeting with my client. And she agreed. And the reason I knew that she would agree is because I could see that she had started a women's network at one of her previous employers, just as a volunteer activity at one of the companies she worked for. So it kind of tells me if she would have the time. The other thing is, I had another client who had been laid off from an IT career of 17 years. She was trying to get in with a startup in the US. They were building a business in Sydney, and she reached out to the man in LinkedIn, the person that she knew was of influence. And she said, look, can I just get a 15-minute phone call with you? And we converted the time zones so that she could offer, I'm free anytime, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. your time, Monday through Friday next week, or whatever days that worked for her. And he got back to her the next day and said, all right, let's have a call Thursday. And she got an interview out of that. She ended up finding another opportunity, but it goes to show you, if you don't impose too much on the person when you're asking for that free informational meeting, 15-minute call. If they like you, they'll come back and want to help you. So good question. What do you recommend is the first step you should take to start getting clarity on applying for jobs? Good question. So I think, most people are hopefully excited about what they studied and what they now have a degree in. I think it's still helpful to do your strengths profile, whether you do it with me or on your own. It's better if you have someone help you unpack it, because I did it many, many years ago and I didn't quite understand it as much as I could have. It's good to know your strengths profile so that when you're picking a career, you can go through the analytics of, does every strength get leveraged in this new role? So I did it with a gentleman yesterday. He is an investment banker, and we did a matrix where we listed his top 10 strengths that he had done on the online profiling tool. And then we asked, what are the strengths that are a problem right now for his current role? Why is he unhappy? And it was a bit about he has intellection and he was just bored now. He's not really doing anything new. And it was consistency, which is one of his strengths. That's all about fairness. And he felt like there were some things happening at the business that were not fair to the customers or to the investment bankers that work there. So now he has a wish list for when he entertains a new job, because he is looking, that he can go through that analysis on his own, because we've walked through it, that he can tick the box of, okay, this job, in fact, he had an interview and he realized here are the things that it doesn't tick the box in letting me use these strengths. So like harmony is one of his strengths too. So it's very important to him to have a team that really gets along well and they're good people, not just after money. That was unusual for people in his industry, he told me. So yeah, knowing your strengths is a great process to approach. And then you could even take it a step further and go, okay, what do I want in my dream job? Now, I will tell you, you can't be as picky if you're starting out in just graduating from uni. So you've got to work through getting some experience. But if we definitely want to target a particular industry, you can say, yep, I would like to have a job that allows me to use my marketing degree or my HR degree or IT degree, and hopefully is maybe in the technology products, or it's a company that's in the food industry, which is quite stable right now because of COVID. So kind of setting out that plan and having a plan A, a plan B, and plan C. So plan A would be, yep, I score a full-time job, great pay. Plan B might be I keep working my part-time job, but then do some other stuff that is in the industry that I'm targeting. And plan C is maybe I have 2 or 3 jobs in the industry I'm targeting, and none of them are full-time, but it's getting me experience. Okay, good questions, you guys. So if a uni grad wanted to connect with people in the industry they want to join on LinkedIn, besides being polite and asking just for advice, how can they draw attention to get responses? Good question. So if you're approaching someone on LinkedIn, I know it's cheesy, but I would use flattery. So, hey, I really read your profile with interest. I admire your career journey. I would love to have a virtual coffee with you, or I can even come to you face to face. So again, make it as easy as possible that you'll come to them in the city or wherever they work. But yeah, making some sort of statement about how you admire, or maybe they worked at one particular employer that you really are excited about, and tell them that you're excited about this business and the products that they create. So that's helpful, but it's even more powerful if someone else on LinkedIn knows that person and they can make an introduction for you. So I can make introductions for you to people in most industries, and I can find people that will know people in the industries. And if you have someone introducing you, then generally they would give the time. So I had a man who was moving from Darwin to Adelaide, CFO, finance manager. He asked me, who are the contacts that you have in Adelaide? And I don't have a lot of contacts. So I reached out to a couple of financial planning businesses, and they gave me a lovely man in Adelaide that was willing to meet with my client. So just through that. So I don't know him, but the fact that he offered and agreed, makes him a person that wants to help others, which is wonderful. Applying for a new job can be challenging and overwhelming. So how do I stay motivated to stick it out and be consistent with applications despite rejection? I think part of that motivation, keeping that motivation, is having those networking chats scheduled. So I would set, I've heard a lady get up at a success speech and give a talk about, she had a goal of 50 coffee dates. This is before COVID. And she would not necessarily have that list pre-filled out from the get-go, but from the coffee dates that she had, they would then refer her to new people. And that is how she got her dream job, working for a women's organization. And she couldn't believe it. It kind of married her career experience with her passion. So if you can have kind of a diversified job search strategy where it's not just online applications, that you have a mix of social events with people that can give you advice, whether it's it's okay if you're staying at home, but you're scheduling these coffee chats, virtual coffee chats. They're much more likely to happen today because of COVID, and lots of people are still working from home. So it's a good time to take advantage of that. People have quiet time. They're not worried about being judged in the office by meeting with someone because they're in their own home. And the statistics are that 70% of jobs are found through our network today, not through the online application. So if you just stay true to that, 25-30% of your time is online applications, and then the rest is on networking, that would be great. And don't minimize your friends' parents. That might be helpful. They would be happy to give great advice in the industry that you're targeting. So so it's getting a bit creative, I guess, in making a list to start with on who do I admire and who can I ask questions about in this industry, and then keep building on that list with the goal of meeting with people. And the other thing is, I had a client who had been looking for a job for a couple of years. So he had a heart attack. So he lived in Italy. He moved to Australia, couldn't get a job in the IT industry, so he took something else to pay the bills. And someone gave him the name of a recruiter, and he said, I'll give you the name of this recruiter, but you have to dog him. You have to call him every day. And so he did. He called him 3 days in a row. It landed him an interview with the recruitment firm that week, and they sent him on a job interview, which he got the job a week later. So he had 2 interviews and he got the job. So he's now working there. So persistence, polite, but persistent, really pays off if you can stay the course. The lady that her mom had cancer, she told me that she had given up on nursing because she just couldn't get a graduate position. Here's what's spooky. So even though we had really made her resume and her application letters super strong, she wasn't getting callbacks because there's so much competition when the universities release all these graduates. And I asked my daughter, who works at a private hospital, to please hand her resume to her manager. She did that, and there wasn't any dialogue because she didn't see the manager, and she doesn't work there anymore. But a month later, my client got a call for an interview, and she's gobsmacked. And so we did a rehearsal interview, which was so helpful. She got the job, and the thing is, she was going to give up on nursing and go into restaurant hospitality, and now she's got a full-time job. It's not even a graduate position. It's actually the entry-level nursing position. and they're willing to train her. So don't give up. Keep networking. That is the power. That's a great story. That's the power of networking. If you can keep talking to people or reconnect with people that you haven't talked to for a year, keep those connections warm, because that way they'll think of you when they hear of something that comes up. Okay. How are we doing on time? 11:40. Okay, here's another one. If you end up with a period of time where you have been actively looking for work but didn't actually get any experience during it, is that explainable during interviews when asked about it? Absolutely. It's actually easier to explain in the interviews, but what's important is we need to put just a little bit of one-liners in your resume as well to explain that gap. So if you were doing a bit of volunteer work, if you were supporting family through a crisis, or it's better if you can show, even if you weren't paid, that you were doing some sort of work, if we can do that. But yeah, for a good example of this is COVID. So if you were unemployed during COVID, we need to own that on your resume and list, for the last 6 months or a year, job ended because of COVID shutdown, and the employers are not judging people for that. Okay, I think I've got through all the questions. I really appreciate you guys joining today. Thanks for all the great questions. I'll just leave it one more moment if you have any others. All right, well, I will let you go. Thank you for watching today. And if you haven't already, I would love you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which I am just now trying to launch and grow, so that your support really helps me out. And of course, you can also subscribe and follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.